We are back. Welcome on back in for more Q&A on the topic of making change stick at post-retreat accountability and momentum. Let's jump back in.
I love the concept of cleanup. Okay, for me, the question is the challenge, I should say, when you get in, when you're actually on site doing the retreat itself. Okay, even though Ronnie and I have interviewed pretty much everyone around the table, we don't know. We might know a little bit about the industry. We know a little bit about the company, but everyone around the table knows an awful lot more about both of those things than we do. They know a lot more about the history of the interpersonal relationships. They know a lot more about the strategy. And for us, it's very exciting to be sort of part of what fuels the growth. But unless you come in with as a facilitator with humility, okay, I think it's very hard to actually be effective, right? On one hand, the answer is in the room. Our job is to pull it out. On the other hand, we also have a lot of leadership experience, and we're frankly also professional trainers. We need to not just stir the stew and pull out from everybody. We need to add in a whole bunch of ingredients that everyone sort of says, you know, I hadn't thought of it that way. I could use that with my team. Gee, I hadn't thought of it that way. That'll make a big difference in terms of such and such. And when you get that common vocabulary across everybody in the organization, then it becomes a lot easier for people to say a particular term and everyone knows what they mean. Okay, everybody knows what they mean. And so when we get back to the whole question of accountability, I think it's interesting because all of a sudden it's we all know what we're talking about. We use the same words. We've kind of gone through the same experience. And by the way, when I say go through the experience, I'm not talking about let's go for another wine tour, and then we're going to do the high ropes course, and then we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Although those things are good in terms of building relationships separately if it fills in and everything. But if you're doing small group work together, right, you're actually learning about teamwork and you can actually model the skills that we're talking about, right? And when you've got the relationships, the whole question of it isn't just accountability to the boss, but it's accountability to the mission. Gee, you don't want to let one of your colleagues down because you made a promise, right? So I think that there's all these different angles on it that are real interesting. So,
I got my
Rania,
next question.
sure, shoot.
I want to talk about what we hear from everybody out there. The big criticism of retreats is that post-retreat trajectory of waning enthusiasm. Okay, every team gets back. We had a what? Hopefully, we had a wonderful time. Krista, we've pre-cleaned up all the issues with the team. We're aligned. We're romancing and high-fiving. We're having a great time. And they get back and it dwindles, it peters, okay? And everybody talks about this like this is some big, like it's a failure, like a bad reflection on the retreat. But for me, there needs to be like a total new expect management of expectations. It is normal and human nature for enthusiasm to peter out. Any commitment that we make, you name it, there will be, we're constantly taking in new inputs, recalibrating priorities. Every member of the team is having that process of recalibration. And the farther things are in the rearview mirror, the smaller they look, right? So I think the in traction, EOS,
EOS.
he says nobody can hold on to anything for more than 3 months. Nobody. So if that's normal, and we are part of the business of setting expectations here, like why does this gap exist?
I love the point. I'm thinking about my gym membership, and I'm still going to the gym now. Here we are, many months since January. Um,
Okay, so
yeah,
let's talk about that. How do you keep it going? If we how do you override that, or is that just expectation?
yeah, I think that's part of it. Okay. I also think really there's a practical matter of everyone's got the quote regular day job, right? And so you need to make sure that your objectives are met, etc. And then you go to this retreat and what new stuff is added and well, what's fallen off and everything. And so when we talk about reinforcing and the learning and change, I mean, we can go through a whole laundry list of things, not all of which take place at the retreat itself, but I think are critical if you want to actually have the value of the retreat maintained beyond the 3 months that Rodney just said. Some of the things, for example, is we've got to make sure that the culture is one of call it promise keepers. It's a culture of innovation and change. The idea here that hey, it's good. if we keep our promises. It's good if we're constantly innovating and changing. Gee, the retreat is just one big pit stop on that approach of doing so. So part of it is that. Part of it is the more practical part of saying, well, how might we actually embed some of these into the job objectives? Right? What are the annual objectives in your performance appraisal plan? It said, like, is there something in there? Okay. What are the blockers that prevent the actual learning from actual, that degrade the learning faster, I should say, or cause you to do it? One of them, for example, sometimes is time. Is if we add some things on, maybe we need to take something off. Maybe it's a question of saying, having that conversation about where does this fit in the priority of all the different initiatives that we actually have going on. Excuse me, with respect to behaviors and everything, one thing that we'll do after a retreat is we'll schedule a couple office hours, Q&A sessions that anyone at the retreat can actually come in, maybe a month out and second one a second month out, where they can ask questions. Hey, I was in this situation. What do you think? Okay. And the fact that people can attend those office hours, it's a way for them to ask some questions and for us to reinforce some of the ideas that went over, or if people had a implementation question about it. Another way is with coaching, right? And sometimes the coaching is a short-term kind of micro coaching, 1 or 2 sessions to address a particular issue that a leader is actually having. And sometimes it's a little bit more longer term, perhaps with key people or high potentials or something where the whole big thing is about how do we make sure somebody well, how do you solve they know what they know, but they don't know what they don't know problem? How do we make sure that some of the concepts that might be critical for the organization and for them as an individual are sustained rather than degraded, etc. Another way, which Rania touched on, is, gee, maybe the retreats should happen more than once a year, right? Maybe, for example, it's not a retreat that happens every single quarter. Maybe what it is bringing the facilitator to actually have an education day or hands-on day, or there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do one day, okay? An inside offsite, if you will, an inside offsite. So there's all kinds of ways to sort of put a little bit more gasoline, if you will, into the change ideas and the attitudes and the culture, etc. Here's another. What if you actually embedded ongoing continuous professional development, ongoing continuing education? Now, most organizations, their commitment to doing training sometimes is more technical. If you're in a medical facility, we want to make sure everyone's got their medical or technical. If you're an accounting organization, well, we want to make sure people have got their accounting hours in, if you will. But how about the management skills? How about the leadership skills? Right? And maybe there's a way that we could drip some of that learning in on a monthly basis. And that way, there's always a little bit more oxygen putting in. Maybe there's a question of saying, we're not in we do a retreat and then we sort of go on. This year we did what's your why? Next year it's what's your how? The year after that it's strategic planning. The year after that is whatever it happens to be. What if the retreats were part of a continuum? Right? So the massive investment that is made in sort of understanding the organization by the retreat facilitators can actually be leveraged another time. So there is some of that continuity, right? So there's a whole bunch of ways to deal with this 3 months and it's done, or gee, we don't have that spark anymore, and the problem's been solved before. Ronnie, is there anything else to add to that you could think of?
I think you did great. I want to talk about we're talking about pre-retreat work. The pre-retreat, maybe micro coaching, you use this term, okay? So they know their players, they know their personalities. You have people who are rah rah, let's go. There are people who are open to new ideas, people who are much more, they're not open to new ideas, or it takes them a while to open up to new ideas. So for those people, We will offer for whatever they need. We'll say, we really want the retreat to land really well for you. Your investment should really work for you. So we put our skin in the game too. We can meet with people before the retreat and hopefully open up their minds and hearts to what's to come and get them comfortable and unblock them in any issues, right?
Mhm.
Do you think if we're doing this, is the writing already on the wall? Like these are their habits. This is how they do things. Are we going to be the miracle workers who hopefully this is going to like what's your experience, Randall? We're going to open it up.
I think that there's two schools of thought. One is the tiger will never change their stripes. They are what they are. Just learn, etc. And let's play to their strengths. Let's make sure that they're in the position to win by getting them to do what they do best. Okay, but spending time addressing the things that they do that are not very, very difficult. The other school of thought, which is kind of where I am, is for a leader to be successful, they always have to be learning. They've got to have lots of new inputs, right? They have to have the right kind of coaching. They need employees to be able to speak honestly to them and course correct with necessarily 360-degree reviews are very helpful for this kind of thing. There's got to be a desire on the part of that leader, that participant to say, I am capable of learning, I am capable of changing, I am capable of incorporating this. But and if you've got that, certainly in the retreat, I think you've got something to work with. However, what happens when the organization grows, and all those people in the leadership roles are growing with it, but some people are at the top of their capability. There is not more growth that's possible, right? And there, the CEO's got to decide, okay, well, are we making a change? Are we not making a change? And for us as retreat facilitators, we deal with who's in the room, right? And we can only do what we can do. We have to assume that everyone's got the capability to change and to grow. We could be motivational in terms of helping share why it's in everyone's interest and the organization's interest. Hopefully, some of those things have come out in the pre-interviews and how the day or days are actually being structured, right? So I think that it's a very, very difficult question. Um, but we have to assume that people are and are able to, right? And the CEO's job when they come up with a leader who's at the end of their capabilities is to say, gee, do we keep them there anyway and we bear the pain? Do we bring in people underneath that can sort of support them and or take over some of their responsibilities? Do we counsel them out? But this is well beyond the whole question of what actually happens in the retreat. If we found out, for example, that so and so is on their way out and so and so is going to be promoted in the next month or two, and but they don't know it yet, and so is going to be we're going to have a reorg, etc. For us, it might be helpful, okay, to know these things, but we need to deal with who's in the room, and we need to assume that everyone can sort of get up the next level. So, Ronnie, what else am I missing in this answer? You've got a perspective?
I think that we're talking about leadership retreats, right? And you can have small organizations as bigger organizations. Like we talk about all the time, the role changes as the organization grows. And the reason why leadership is so challenging is because it does require continuous personal transformation. And as the organization grows, you have to grow. And new personalities, you gotta keep dancing with everybody, right? At different sizes. And I think that if you don't enjoy this process and you're very resistant to this process, it might well be a flag that, which is not to say you're not going to be an amazing asset to this organization, but maybe senior leadership isn't for you. I don't know.
Okay, so Ronnie, I'll put you on the hot seat. What happens if we've got a participant who, frankly, takes a long time for them to sort of come around to ideas? And here we have them for a couple days only, and that's not enough time for them to fully buy into it just because the nature of it. What do you do there?
I think it's a very good question. And the question of what the organizational leadership will bear in terms of behavior and performance is up to them and a reflection of their culture. And I talk to Randall. I say, what are our goals for the retreat? What are achievable for us? And we can leave saying we did a really good job, head and shoulders above everyone else. And like after that, we have to let go and we do as much as we can with the team. We tell all of our clients, Randall, let's go into this retreat super clear on what job requirements are, so that people are not at the retreat going, well, that's on them and not on me. And do our clients do it? I don't know, like, right? We can't like we can op open up their eyes, but we're not consultants, and we always say we're not. We say we're here to hold your hand. We'll be with you as long as you need to, to execute your vision. But they got to hold themselves account. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, yeah.
How would you take it?
No, I'm just going to add something to what you said. Okay. I would say this, the huge benefit of us actually going in is that we can ask questions that perhaps other people might not. Okay, we could talk about the elephant in the room, or we can say, "Hey, so and so, let me push back on that for a second, and ask how would how would you do such and such? Not in a way to embarrass anyone, but we can say, explain it to me, right? Help me understand. Okay. We could use techniques to help solicit other points of view in a way that don't denigrate anybody's role or ego or anything. But as an outsider, I think that we can sort of do a little bit to sort of keep the ball rolling because precisely we're not insiders. So that's the only thing that I would add to yours.
Again, in my mind, when I'm thinking of this conversation and the questions I brainstormed, it was, what are the complaints, the wahs that people have post-retreat that they find disappointing. And when we talk about that, our priorities fall off the wagon, or we're not where we used to be, or we wanted to be, you know, what sometimes there's a lot of ahas that happen at the retreat and alignment and positive things, and the team gets on the same page and they get clear on definitions. What does accountability mean to us? What are we prepared to use as a carrot and as a stick? What are we prepared to tolerate? Like these basic conversations, they're not always, like a big project we're going to execute on, but it's like an awareness that the team has. Like, can't that be like, isn't that a win in and of itself?
Oh, without a question,
Not a question, right? So how do we help the teams manage that, like measure that so that they can feel really good about it?
I think one of the things that happens when you get the aha moments is when other people refer to this. And I'm not talking about when we're in for like a 1 day retreat, but certainly if we're there for a couple days or we're doing some post work with a client. When people continually refer to a particular concept, right? Long afterwards, because that means that it's actually sitting inside, right? And I think that goes a very far way. The question of how do you measure that, I don't know, but there's been a culture shift when that happens, when people start to use the vocabulary, because everybody knows what that vocabulary is,
Yeah.
right? And that's really, really powerful. Um, I think also sometimes when you see attitudinal shift, that can also make a big difference. All of a sudden, two people that really were not really speaking to each other suddenly are sitting down having a drink at night together. Or people in different divisions who are doing approximately the same job. Okay. All of a sudden realizing that the problems that they're having with the system are the same as somebody else having with the system, and this is my workaround, and this is my workaround. And all of a sudden, there's this network that forms like horizontally, where before there wasn't. And it's not just he's my buddy, I like to, share a meal, etc. But there's a professional connection, and I think that I don't know if this is something that's really in the category of measurable or not. Maybe it is, but. And we sort of joke about another wine tour. Okay, is that really going to make a difference? Okay, and we like wine tours as much as anyone. Wine is very tasty. Okay, but okay, if we get people working together on something, maybe they'll be able to develop a relationship in the context of working together as opposed to drinking wine. Not a bad thing, the wine, but it's just not learning how to work together on a particular issue. And I think that's an interesting thing. So in the retreat design, the question is, do we have, for example, lots of mechanisms where people are working together in pairs and triads and small groups, etc. Okay, and yes is a big group as well. But I think that that's a very interesting thing. Can we measure it afterwards? I'm not so sure, but will those relationships, those work context relationships, uh, persist post-retreat? Yes. And therefore, there's a degree of accountability that exists there too, even if it's not on a formal org chart.
Yeah.
So I love the question, right? I do love the question.
Yeah, we've spoken with clients before where we check in, 4, 6 weeks afterwards, and they go, we are still humming, like we're still on a high, like we feel the energy, we feel that bond that we connected exactly like you said, not because of the wine tour, but because we learned how to work together and we learned how to have the conversations that are about the work. I have my next question. One study found that only 29% of employees can articulate their organization's strategy. Okay? And we talk to clients and they say the same thing. They say we don't feel our directors understand the strategy. We certainly don't feel like our frontline worker, they're in the day to day. And so how can we expect everyone in the organization to hitch their decisions and their day to day onto the strategy if they don't know what it is? And often the organization at the head there, I mean, things are happening behind closed doors. There's conversations happening, there's deals happening. And by the time, things are decided, things trickle down. Like, how can we get our employees to be more in sync with our organizational strategy? And why am I saying that? Because professional development can only really work if it's in sync with the strategy.
How about that? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, I could tell you how not to do it. Okay. If you walk around most large corporate, organizations, financial institutions, large whatever, you will see on the wall, you will see a poster that says our strategy, our four focus areas, as if having these things out there on billboards, on posters, miscellaneously placed around the office will suddenly cause people to say, aha, yes, I understand what that means, let alone I understand what it means in the context of my responsibilities. No, so we know that, yeah, okay, important, okay, but it's not going to move the needle in any way. I think part of it is the question of imbuing the importance of not just communication to everybody within the retreat, but also the issue of modeling what that actually means. Okay, so for example, if somebody comes into your office and says, you know something, I had this great idea of such and such. Wouldn't it be great if they also said, I think that will help deal with the strategic initiative of number 3.1 of such and such. This is the missing piece, in fact. Well, I don't know if that'll ever happen ever, right? But wouldn't it be nice if we sort of said to ourselves, yeah, our direct reports understand how what they do actually matters, and this is how it sort of flows up. This is how it matters, right? I did something at a retreat. Oh, gee, it must have been around 15 years ago. There was around 20 people in the room, and what I did is uh, I asked everybody to write down, okay, on a piece of paper, what the organization strategy was. Okay, and I said, you've all been here for a number of years, and you're responsible people. And then we're just going to go around and everyone's going to read it real quick. And of course, it was terrible because everyone wrote something completely different. There are great things they wrote, but they were completely different. And gee, if this group can't articulate clearly, how in heck can their direct reports, let alone their direct reports, if it's a large organization, actually articulate it? So the whole question of communication on one hand is, yes, how do we make sure that these kinds of things cascade? There needs to be the knowledge. Part of it is how, to your point, Rania, how is the training and learning and development synchronized with what that strategy is, so that it flows down. Part of it is what are the other communication channels that can be used? Is the CEO doing a town halls? Is there, for example, any Ask Me Anything meetings with different executives? Is there, for example, time where the leaders actually spend time on the floor in the organization, sort of picking things up? We talked about that, Rodney, just the other day. Um, is there an opportunity for secondments where people can actually see how that strategy is executed in other parts of the organization, right? Is there a strategy that's so high up in the air? There's no possible way that anybody will say that's relevant to me. Or is there a strategy that everyone can say, I get it, I know the purpose, I know our mission, okay, and I know exactly this is how we're going to do it, okay? My role in that is to fill in the blank. Wouldn't that be nice, right? And it all starts. I'm sorry, I'm sort of on a bit of a soapbox here, but
Okay.
whatever. Um, it all starts with that team at the retreat becoming aligned. Because unless we get everybody aligned, none of the rest is possible. And I think that's one of the most important things, when it comes to saying, okay, what do we want to make sure happens at this particular retreat? Is if we don't have alignment, there's no possibility of accountability for anything.
We're coming up on the hour. Anybody have any final thoughts, final questions?
Well, it's more common that really questions is it seems like healthier the work culture is, easier the retreats will go, right? Because I could think, for example, of one particular company where the CEO was once in a while, flying the handle and screaming at people and swearing at people. So it didn't create like trust, or other company that when they ask feedback, there's no action that happened after. So the employee doesn't feel that it's worth putting themselves, on the hot seat to give feedbacks and stuff like that. So it seems like healthier is the culture, easier is the retreat, or would you agree?
Well, I've got an opinion on that. Rania, what do you think?
Um, I mean, like the healthier the person, the healthier the diet. I mean, yes, but there's also a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity, and sometimes it's even we can remind the employees that like you don't need your boss's permission to be excellent. And you don't, you know what I mean? Like you're building your own career here, like sometimes people need different pep talks, not to use the term dismissively, but um it's very rewarding when there is dysfunction, which is there's going to be dysfunction on teams, and we are able to have a breakthrough with them. And even if it doesn't fix it, for them to see that there's a different way. I mean, it's rewarding. I appreciate what you're saying. What do you think, Randall?
I think that the CEO, if they're going to hire us to do a retreat and they've got that kind of very dysfunctional management style, I've got to respect the fact that they realize the team as a whole can do better. And we appreciate the fact that they didn't decide not to invest in their team and themselves. What I've spoken to those types of leaders to say that, something more than anything else, you need to kind of model the type of leadership that you want your team to actually model to the next level down. And so the mode of operation that you've had in the past might have been the best for an organization this size. But if you keep on doing that mode of operation as it gets bigger and bigger, is it possible that fill in the blank, fill in the blank, fill in the blank? Or is it possible that you need to use that as a tool from time to time, but there's some other ways that you can do it? We're not going to change the person immediately, but they're smart enough to realize that the team as a whole needs some alignment, needs some professional development, needs to accomplish something in the retreat, and getting them to practice modeling something. Okay, at least at the retreat, we'll give them a taste of something else. Um, we're not here to second guess any particular leader's style, like the CEO's style, etc. They're the CEO and they've got a tough job to do, right? But not always are they aware of the impact of some of their behaviors on one hand, or sometimes they're totally aware of the impact, but they can't help themselves. Okay, and in which case it's, I don't know, frustrating for those around. But does the CEO have a desire to do better? I think is a very, very important point. And some of those things are handled one-on-one privately beforehand and possibly afterwards. Okay, in terms of the conversations we might have. And some of it is getting their agreement to try to use another mode of behavior during the retreat itself to see how it feels and here's some benefits of it. So that's what I would add to it.
I was mostly asking the question because I don't think the leaders would volunteer that they're screaming to their team, right? So I don't
Oh,
think you would walked in knowing that.
And when you said here we wouldn't know it in advance, our approach is we tell the client we want to interview as many people as possible, and we
Mm,
ask the client's permission. We say we are going to tell them that it's confidential and they can share whatever they want in the spirit of us peeling that onion and getting to the issue so that the organization could perform at a high level. Our clients are high performing,
yeah,
multi-million, billion-dollar clients. It is in their best interest to get their team high performing at a high level. And the people do tell us, they tell us CEO has to resign. I'm sick of all the call. I'm sick of being called bad words, sick of being called at home, like the bad behavior, the
we
kind
hear about
oh,
it.
that's
we hear about
wonderful.
it, right? And then we do not, I think that so we're able to then support them in a way that maybe their HR and a CEO cannot. And we do not, when clients tell us we have a survey for you, we go, that's cute. We'll take your survey, but we also want to do our interviews. And or we try to help them, create a survey that is realistically what can we expect your team to be forthcoming with and
Right.
not, what are they not going to be forthcoming about.
Yeah, the survey is a great way to sort of start off, the interview process because it might flag an idea that we hadn't considered before and everything. It certainly gives us ideas as to what people as a whole want to hear, but it's wiring up a machine, an organization with new ideas and change and everything is, so you probably know it's a complex thing,
Mhm.
right? And I think that I know we've been in situations where people say the retreat's a reward for a good year. And if that's the goal of the retreat, let's put everyone on the President's Club on a ridiculously expensive cruise or off to Thailand or whatever it is. That's fine. That's part of the compensation, right? We've had other retreats where people say, well, this is a great way to do some shopping. And that's what the retreats are for. But no, no, it's not. Okay. And
Yeah,
and
and
so
that you were really clear about, yeah, that you're Rania was really clear about like asking what's the goal of that retreat. I love it. Thank
yeah,
you
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
much. You guys are that was a great session. Thank you.
I'll thank Randall for the conversation. Thank everyone who joined us live or who listened in. If any of the issues we talked about resonate with you, if you're considering change, want our perspective, if you're planning your next retreat or coaching for your team, happy to have a conversation, share resources. And if you want invites to our live, regular monthly sessions on coaching and retreats, but also all other business and strategy topics, you can email us at podcast@randallhead.com. We look forward to keeping in touch on LinkedIn and seeing you next time.